Welcome to Holme Horror. I've been waiting for you. The awakening. Jason's eyes fluttered open, and blinding fluorescent lights greeted him. The sterile smell of antiseptic stung his nose. Machines beeped softly around him, their steady rhythm oddly calming against the whirlwind of his thoughts. His body felt heavy, like he'd been submerged in tar. Panic bubbled under the surface, but it was tempered by one overwhelming relief. It had all been a nightmare. The images of blood-soaked streets, the screams, and the sensation of a knife in his hand. It had to be a dream. A grotesque, impossible dream. Jason? A soft voice cut through the haze. He turned his head slowly, wincing at the stiffness in his neck. A nurse stood beside him, her kind face a beacon of calm. "You're awake," she said. "You've been unconscious for almost 3 days. Do you know where you are?" He tried to speak, but his throat was dry and raw. He shook his head weakly. "You're in St. Mary's Hospital," she explained. "You were found unconscious downtown. Do you remember anything?" Jason hesitated. The dreams clawed at the edges of his mind, flashes of red, cries of terror, but he couldn't piece them together. "No," he croaked, his voice barely audible. "I don't remember." The nurse offered a sympathetic smile and poured water into a cup. As she helped him drink, she added, "That's okay. The doctor will be in soon to talk to you. For now, just rest." She left the room, and Jason was alone with his thoughts. He stared at the ceiling, trying to push away the images that lingered. But the harder he tried, the more vivid they became. The doctor arrived an hour later, a middle-aged man with a serious demeanor. He carried a clipboard and introduced himself as Dr. Patel. "Jason, I need to ask you a few questions," he began, sitting down at the edge of the bed. "Do you recall what happened before you were brought here?" Jason shook his head. "No. I've been having these nightmares. Horrible ones." Dr. Patel's expression didn't shift. "What kind of nightmares?" Jason hesitated. "I saw people, dead, blood everywhere. I think I was the one who killed them." The doctor's gaze was unreadable. "Jason, these may not have been just nightmares. When you were brought in, your clothes were stained with blood, other people's blood. The police are investigating." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. "What? No, that's not possible. I didn't." "We don't know exactly what happened yet," Dr. Patel interrupted gently. "But there's something else you need to know. We found traces of a drug in your system, scopolamine. It's commonly known as devil's breath. It can impair memory, inhibit free will, and make people susceptible to suggestion." Jason stared at him, his mind racing. "Are you saying someone drugged me?" "It's a possibility," Dr. Patel said carefully. "You may have been coerced into actions you wouldn't normally commit." Jason's stomach churned. The nightmares weren't dreams. They were memories. The police came next. 2 officers stood at the foot of his bed, their expressions a mix of caution and suspicion. They asked questions he couldn't answer, about places he didn't remember visiting and people whose faces were a blur. He tried to explain the drug, the memory loss, but their skeptical glances made it clear they weren't buying it. One officer handed him a folder. "Recognize these?" she asked, her voice flat. Jason opened it with trembling hands. Photographs spilled out, crime scene photos. A woman in her 20s, her throat slashed, her body crumpled in an alley. A man slumped over a table in a dimly lit bar, stab wounds riddling his chest. A third photo showed a child's toy smeared with blood, lying on a cracked sidewalk. Jason gagged, his breath hitching. No, I didn't. I couldn't have." The officer didn't flinch. "You were found a block away from one of these scenes, covered in blood. Witnesses saw you fleeing another. Do you expect us to believe you had nothing to do with it?" "I don't remember," Jason cried, tears streaming down his face. "Someone drugged me. I wasn't in control." "Convenient," the officer said, her tone icy. She closed the folder. "Forensics will tell us if you're lying." The next few days were a blur of agony and self-doubt. Alone in his hospital bed, Jason was haunted by fragmented memories, flashes of screaming faces, the weight of a knife in his hand, the coppery scent of blood. He couldn't reconcile these images with himself. He wasn't a violent person. He wasn't a killer. Was he? The nurses avoided his gaze, and the police presence outside his room was a constant reminder of the gravity of his situation. Jason's mind spiraled, searching for answers, clinging to the hope that the drug had made him a puppet. But even that wasn't comforting. If someone had used him as a weapon, who was pulling the strings? And why? On the fifth night, Jason awoke to the sound of something shuffling in the hallway. His heart pounded as he strained to hear over the beeping machines. The door creaked open slowly, and a figure stepped inside. It was a man in a dark hoodie, his face obscured. Jason froze, terror rooting him to the bed. "Who are you?" he whispered. The man didn't answer. He moved closer, his steps deliberate. In the dim light, Jason caught the glint of something metallic in the man's hand. A knife. Panic surged. "Help! Somebody!" The man lunged, clamping a hand over Jason's mouth and pressing the blade to his throat. "Quiet," he hissed. Jason's chest heaved as he stared into the man's eyes. They were cold, devoid of empathy. "You don't remember, do you?" the man said, almost amused. "How you begged me to help you?" "What are you talking about?" Jason mumbled against the man's hand. "You wanted to make your problems disappear, said you'd do anything, so I gave you a little push, made you useful." Jason's mind reeled. "The drug? It was you?" The man smirked. "Think of it as a partnership. You wanted freedom from your debts, your failures. I needed someone to clean up loose ends. You did beautifully." Jason's stomach churned. "You used me to kill for you." The man's grip tightened. "And now you'll take the fall. It's perfect." Before Jason could react, the man drove the knife into his side. Pain exploded through his body as he screamed into the man's palm. The blade twisted, and Jason felt hot blood pooling beneath him. The man withdrew the knife and stepped back, watching as Jason writhed in agony. "Don't worry," he said, his voice calm. "The police will think it's a suicide. Case closed." He turned and slipped out of the room, leaving Jason gasping for air, his vision blurring. As the darkness closed in, one thought consumed him. He had to stop this monster. When Jason woke, he wasn't in the hospital anymore. He was strapped to a cold metal table, the restraints biting into his skin. Overhead, a single bulb cast harsh light over the room. The hooded man stood nearby, his back turned, humming a tuneless melody as he prepared something on a tray. Jason's mouth was dry, his throat raw, but he forced himself to speak. "Why? Are you doing this?" The man turned, a syringe in his hand. "Because, Jason, some people are born to be predators, and others, prey. You're just part of the cycle." Jason struggled against the restraints, but it was futile. The man approached, the needle gleaming. "This is the same stuff I gave you before," he said casually, "but this time I'll make sure you're nice and obedient. There's more work to be done." "No," Jason whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Please." The man's smile was cruel as he injected the drug into Jason's arm. The world dissolved into chaos. Shadows danced, colors bled together, and Jason's screams echoed in his own ears. And then, silence. Days later, the news reported a string of murders across the city. Gruesome killings, all bearing the same signature. The primary suspect, Jason Carter, had vanished without a trace. Police warned the public to remain vigilant. In a dimly lit basement, Jason stood beside the hooded man, his eyes vacant, a knife clutched in his trembling hand. The man patted his shoulder. "Good boy," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "We've got so much more to do." Thanks for watching. And don't forget to subscribe for more chilling stories. And remember, be careful. I'll be watching you.